Disney will put out 5 or 6 movies in the theater every year that all cost $250 million. No other studio does that. Universal don't do it. Sony don't do it. Paramount don't do it. Warner Brothers don't do it. They might have 1 or 2 big blockbuster budgeted films, but with Disney, everything they put out is a blockbuster budgeted film. They do the same thing on Disney Plus, which is what killed Disney Plus. And nobody watches Disney Plus. People don't go surfing Disney Plus to see what's on. They go to Netflix and Amazon Prime. They don't go anywhere else for that. So Disney's trying to act like they're Netflix and spend like they're Netflix, but they don't have anywhere remotely close. They don't have even a fifth of the Netflix audience. Renegade Online. We got the Disney call coming up, the annual shareholder meeting coming up on Thursday. And we might
be a big deal, you know. You remember Valiant? They used to put these things in special locations, and there was all kinds of fanfare associated with it. Not so much anymore.
It's just like the Snow White premiere. It's all AstroTurf and fake. Real people with real questions, real shareholders no longer are allowed to call in after the debacle of 2 years ago. It was a debacle for Iger. It was great for the shareholders. They roasted him. They humiliated him on air, asking about all the what Disney was doing with, grooming children and all this kind of stuff with their content. Bob Iger never allowed another shareholder at a shareholder meeting again after that. We have it on the live stream. We covered it live. We were there because we were sitting there going, oh God, did he just actually ask that? Holy shit. I mean, we were covering it live. We were coming out of our chairs. We couldn't believe it. So last year, they went to this system of basically it was submit your questions before the meeting, and then they had an AI chatbot read like a composite of questions. And of course, they were all very, very scrubbed, because somebody would probably get on there this year and ask, because there's a big difference between even 3 or 4 years ago and today. A lot more people are educated on how much Disney has failed, because all the stuff they do online with, hey, this is the biggest box office movie of the year so far. Yeah, but you lost $200 million on Captain America 4. But it's the biggest box office of the year so far. So they're getting more pressure. Like if they were to let Joe Blow call in shareholder, I'm telling you right now, at some point during one of these earnings calls, somebody's going to say something like that. It's like, I heard, people are talking about that this recent, you lost $200 million on that. Could you please explain why, Disney lost about $1 billion at the box office in 2023? That's how we wound up with that Fox News clip. For those of y'all who haven't seen it, I'll play it real quick. But this is where it started to go downhill for Disney. This was the last year that they allowed shareholders on the earnings call.
Is Mickey Mouse about to lose his house? It seems woke Disney fairy tales equal low ticket sales. Box office analysis of Disney's last 8 studio releases show a shocking loss of nearly $1 billion. That's almost a lawsuit. That's according to a number crunch by prominent YouTuber Valiant Renegade, who argues that many of Disney's recent so-called hits barely broke even or flat out tanked.
See, more people cover this kind of stuff now, and that was from 2023, folks. Oh. And more people have talked about this, and then Bob didn't want to have people on the annual shareholder meeting, because that was the one time a year where actual Joe average shareholders would get to kind of call in and ask questions, because the earnings calls was for the analysts. It was for the JP Morgans. It was for the Goldman Sachs. It's for the big bank, the institutional investors to ask their questions. Now it's like submit the questions up front and we'll see if we'll answer yours. But as of right now, the problem with Disney is, apart from Disney got hit more than I think a lot of other companies in this downturn, because part of the thinking is that if the economy slows down, which it will to some degree, but not necessarily in the private sector, as Mark, I think you pointed out earlier, talking about, government spending is a significant portion of the GDP. And if you're going to cut $1 or $2 trillion out of government spending every year from where we are now, the GDP is going to go down. But the private sector may still be in expansion. So there's a caveat to this, but Disney right now is at $98 a share. It's basically where it was 5 years ago. It really hasn't moved.
It's a real PR problem, by the way.
Yeah. And on March 20th, which is a little early this year, typically we see Disney do this the first week of April. The last time I went back and looked, the last time they had one that was earlier in March was in 2022. That was the year that Bob Iger took over for the first time. In the previous years when it was, when Chapek took over, since Iger's been, it's always been in April. This time they decided to push it back to March 20th. It just so happens one day before Snow White comes out in theaters, which even Disney seems to be terribly concerned how it's going to perform. Disney seems to be expecting this movie to bomb. So they've made sure that the annual shareholder meeting will come out the day before Snow White does, so they can have this glorious puff piece about, and we're so excited with how much money we're about to make with Snow White. And they don't have to answer for what is probably going to be a lukewarm performance a couple of weeks later. So Disney has an issue with parks. They seem to be stagnant. Epic Universe at Comcast is expecting 10 million visitors in the first 12 months when the park opens in May. And that's probably lowballing. Magic Kingdom has around 12 plus million visitors a year. Epic Universe could take it out. So we're looking at a shifting in the wind. They have problem with linear broadcast. They've just signed a very expensive new contract with the NBA that has ratings that drop faster than a hot turd in the middle of summer. Nothing is really kind of moving in the right direction. Disney might have a couple of good things at the box office this year. Disney Plus is still not really making any money. Hulu's bailing it out. They're spending a lot more money on that. I just don't know what. I wonder, I guess, Guy, what are we going to brag about? What is Disney going to come in here with this earnings call? What's going to be the attitude that we're filling in the rivers of America and building an off-road track for cars in the Magic Kingdom? Is that what they're going to brag on?
I think they have run out of fuel. They did everything they could to stop Nelson Peltz. The proxy battle, that's where it was all at.
Yeah.
And since then, as we said back then, they don't have anything. And so they've been coming up with these announcements that amount to very little. You have these things they're saying with the parks that just make people mad. And we know that the vast amount of their talent has left, and it's across multiple domains. So their Imagineers are gone, so they can't build amazing new things for their parks. That a lot of their talent has exited the doors when it comes to their movie making. They are in a situation right now where even if they want to rectify, they're going to have a hard time doing it. It's going to take a long time because as part of this Summer of Love response that Disney had, they purged out the best and the brightest, the geniuses. And you don't simply go and restore geniuses because they had decades and decades of these pipelines to get the very best and brightest across multiple industries. And they don't have that. They don't have animators, for example, anymore like they did. So what's Disney going to do with the shareholders meeting? I think we're going to get AI sounding questions asked to Bob Iger that go something like, "Hello, Bob. Please, how are you the best CEO in the world?" And then he'll give us the 3-minute spiel that includes 17 references to magic, and
right.
We'll move on. Like they're at a point now where everybody knows that they don't have anything, and I've called this repeatedly the nightmare quarter. Right? It's the triple threat. Box office down. We've seen that. It's not over yet. Streaming down. Sorry, Dana. And parks down.
Yeah.
And that's the whole biz. It's the whole thing.
It really is. Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question, Pro?
Yeah.
I'm not storied on all the different phases of Disney as it's unfolded over the years, but I'm looking at their stock chart, and they hit 100 in January of 2015, and they're at 100 now. And if you look at the chart, save for the little COVID dalliance with streaming,
right,
they've been flat. They hit a wall. So how did they grow so fast post-great financial crisis? And then what happened in the company in literally like January of 2015 or thereabouts?
Here's what's really fascinating, Mark. That blip you see where they go up to about 200.
Yeah.
That is during the very brief 6 to 9 month window where they did not have Bob Iger as a CEO. It is remarkable. And then that CEO, Bob Chapek, was essentially removed for political reasons. And they went right back down to the baseline. The other fascinating thing, Mark, is that although they have remained flat, and Valiant can speak to this, they've remained flat But inflation means that remaining flat indicates that you have a lessening transactional power and probably a lessening cultural impact because, well, money is power and power is money and influence. So, yeah, this is a company that lives off of PR and people believing in the legacy nonsense they spout every single day. But in terms of how they've performed, Bob Iger was in a much better position if he had not returned because he had a much better appearing time at Disney, acquiring all of these things. When he came back, it was like Jordan coming back to the Wizards. Not a good look, not a good thing. And it pulled the veneer off of him where people thought that he was one of the greatest CEOs in the last century.
Well, there's a lot of people that still do. The Disney stock price spiked in early 2021, and Bob Iger was still there as
consultant
executive. Well, he was still chairman of the board at that point. He was still chairman. He wasn't completely gone until January of 22. The spike was due to the rapid growth of Disney's Disney Plus's subscriber base, and that was at a point when Wall Street was absolutely enwrapped with the fool's gold of get as many subscribers as you can. They weren't looking at profitability. Wall Street still to this day does not understand what it costs, or in this case, what Disney does with Disney Plus in terms of how much they spend to produce original content, especially Marvel and Star Wars stuff. $600 million for 2 seasons of Andor that almost nobody watches, Mark. That kind of thing. 250, 300 million for The Acolyte, which virtually nobody watched. The problem is that the paint came off when people started seeing how much money Disney Plus was tearing through. The losses kept mounting up, and that shocked them. Then they started looking around and realizing, well, wait a minute, they got the same problem at Warner Brothers with Max. They got the same problem to a lesser extent. They have the same problem at Paramount with Paramount Plus or Peacock over there at Universal. The difference was Disney was the only one that was going Mach 10 into massively overproduced, hyper-expensive original content. Basically the same thing that Disney does, and we talked about this earlier in the show before you got here, Mark. Disney will put out 5 or 6 movies in the theater every year that all cost $250 million. No other studio does that. Universal don't do it, Sony don't do it, Paramount don't do it, Warner Brothers don't do it. They might have 1 or 2 big blockbuster budgeted films, but with Disney, everything they put out is a blockbuster budgeted film, with the exception of their acquired properties from places like Fox, with Fox Studios or Searchlight or some of that kind of stuff. They do the same thing on Disney Plus, which is what killed Disney Plus, and nobody watches Disney Plus. People don't go surfing Disney Plus to see what's on. They go to Netflix and Amazon Prime. They don't go anywhere else for that. So Disney's trying to act like they're Netflix and spend like they're Netflix, but they don't have anywhere remotely close. They don't have even a fifth of the Netflix audience. And that's kind of been the problem. And they're not going to get out of that problem probably ever. Hulu might be able to get them there. But to your point, Mark, about the stock price and how weird it is, I can explain to you how it's even worse. Because in 2015, when it broke through 100, and it's 2025, and it's now still about 100, do you know what's happened since 2015?
Well, you're talking to a politics guy. 5 years of Trump. Right?
Well, no. What I'm getting at is what Disney has done. In 2018, they closed a deal for $72 billion to buy Fox. And they're worth as much today as they were 3 or 4 years before they closed that deal. Oof. Their market cap is only about $200 billion. And their market cap was about $200 billion when they spent $72 billion to acquire Fox. It's literally not there, Mark. Yeah. It's just evaporated.
Well, like you said, the inflation calculator, they should be worth 138 today.
Correct. But that's never reported in the legacy media. Never, ever.
No. But that's the kind of thing that they miss. And I see articles all the time, talking about, well, here's why Disney's a good buy. And we don't give financial advice here. I'm just telling you this is what some of the pablum on. And I've been hearing this for like 5 years. Like they keep saying this and it keeps never going anywhere. It's because the company does not know what to do with its own assets. I mean, it's got dying linear. It's got a streaming service that they're pretending like it's turning a corner. But all Disney has done to get it to, quote unquote, turn the corner is to radically slash what they were spending, putting on the original content that nobody was watching. Or at least nobody in near big enough numbers was watching to justify what they were spending.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.